March 6, 2024. In a small town in rural Indiana, the body of a young housewife is discovered in a secluded field. As the investigation unfolds, the police uncover a shocking scandal involving a Christian priest, an affair, an abortion, and ultimately, murder. In the quiet town of St. Mary's Parish, where everyone knows each other's business, Emma Richardson lived what many would call an ideal life. She had a beautiful home, 2 lovely children, and a hard-working husband, John. But John's dedication to providing for his family meant long hours at the office and late nights buried in paperwork. Emma, though proud of her husband's success, often found herself alone, her days filled with chores and her nights empty of conversation. It was during one of those lonely days, after Sunday service, that Emma first spoke to Father Michael Donovan. The priest had a way about him, calm, understanding, and genuinely interested in the lives of his parishioners. Emma admired how he always seemed to have the right words for those in need. They started with small talk, discussing the sermon or the latest community event. But as the weeks passed, their conversations grew deeper. Father Michael would ask about Emma's well-being, and she found herself opening up in ways she hadn't with anyone else. She told him about her loneliness, how John was never around, and how she felt like just another piece of the furniture in her own home. Father Michael listened intently, offering comfort where he could, and soon their meetings became a regular occurrence. They would sit in his office at the church, where the walls seemed to close them off from the rest of the world. What started as innocent talks about faith and family slowly turned into something neither of them expected. Father Michael, despite his vows, couldn't deny the growing attraction he felt towards Emma. She, in turn, found in him the attention and care she so desperately missed. Their first kiss happened on a cold December evening. Emma had come to the church after another argument with John. Tears filled her eyes as she spoke of her frustration and loneliness. Father Michael reached out to comfort her, and before either of them could think, their lips met. The guilt was immediate, but so was the passion. From that moment, they were bound in a secret that would eventually destroy them both. By January, just a month after their first kiss, Emma began feeling the signs. She was often tired, felt nauseous in the mornings, and her emotions were all over the place. She suspected what it might be, but didn't want to face it. The thought that she could be carrying Father Michael's child filled her with both excitement and dread. One evening, after putting the children to bed, she took a pregnancy test. Her hands trembled as she waited for the result. When the 2 lines appeared, confirming her fears, she sat on the bathroom floor, tears streaming down her face. What was she going to do? How could she explain this to John? She hadn't been with him in weeks, and there was no way the baby could be his. John, who had noticed Emma's mood swings and the changes in her behavior, began to suspect something was wrong. He asked her if she was feeling all right, if something was bothering her, but she brushed him off each time. She couldn't tell him the truth. Not now, not ever. When Emma told Father Michael about the pregnancy, she expected him to be shocked, but she didn't expect the coldness in his response. He was horrified, not by the life they had created, but by what it meant for him. He knew that if the affair came to light, he would lose everything: his position in the church, the respect of the community, and his very soul. "You have to get rid of it," he said bluntly, his voice devoid of the warmth that once drew her to him. Emma was stunned. She had thought, perhaps foolishly, that they could find a way to make it work, that maybe this baby was a sign that they were meant to be together. But Father Michael saw the baby as nothing more than a threat to his carefully constructed life. Father Michael was relentless. Day after day, he pressured Emma to get an abortion. He reminded her of the scandal it would cause, how it would destroy both their lives. He told her that they had sinned, and the only way to atone was to erase the evidence of their wrongdoing. Emma, caught between her love for him and her own guilt, eventually agreed. In mid-February, she made the call. The clinic was hours away, in a city where no one would recognize her. Father Michael drove her there, both of them silent for most of the trip. When they arrived, he stayed in the car, leaving her to walk into the cold, clinical building alone. The procedure was quick, but it left Emma feeling empty, as if a part of her soul had been taken away. When it was over, Father Michael drove her back to St. Mary's Parish. Neither of them spoke about what had happened, but the weight of the secret bore down on Emma. She felt it every time she looked at her children, every time she knelt to pray, and every time she saw Father Michael behind the altar. The man who had once been her confidant, her lover, was now a constant reminder of her sin and the life she had ended. The days following the abortion were filled with silence between Emma and Father Michael. They barely spoke, and when they did, it was as if they were strangers. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she had lost more than just a child. She had lost a part of herself. The guilt gnawed at her, growing heavier with each passing day. She couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and when she closed her eyes, all she saw was the face of the baby she would never know. One evening, a few weeks later, after the children were asleep and John was still at work, Emma sat alone in the dark living room, her mind racing. She couldn't keep this secret any longer. The burden was too much to bear. She knew that what she had done was wrong, and she believed that the only way to find peace was to confess. But confessing to God wasn't enough. She needed to confess to the world. The next day, she went to the church, her heart pounding in her chest. Father Michael was in his office, and when he saw her, he knew something was wrong. She told him that she couldn't live with the secret anymore, that she had to tell the congregation about their affair and the abortion. It was the only way, she said, to atone for their sins. Father Michael's face turned pale as he listened to her. He tried to reason with her, to tell her that confessing would only cause more pain, not just for them, but for their families and the entire community. But Emma was determined. She had already made up her mind, and nothing he said could change it. Desperation crept into Father Michael's voice as he begged her to reconsider. He told her that if she exposed them, his life as a priest would be over. He would lose everything, his job, his home, his reputation. But Emma stood firm. She had lived with the guilt for too long, and she couldn't do it anymore. Seeing that she wasn't going to back down, Father Michael's desperation turned to anger. He couldn't let her destroy everything he had worked for. That night, as Emma left the church, Father Michael followed her. He pleaded with her one last time, but when she refused again, something in him snapped. In a moment of blind panic, he grabbed her by the throat and squeezed. Emma struggled, her eyes wide with shock, but Father Michael didn't stop until she was still. When it was over, he looked down at Emma's lifeless body, horror washing over him. He had committed the ultimate sin. He had taken a life. But there was no time to think about that now. He had to get rid of the evidence. He carried Emma's body to his car, drove to a remote field outside of town, and left her there, hoping that no one would ever find her. On the morning of March 6, 2024, a local farmer named Joe Matthews was out checking his fields when he saw something unusual in the distance. As he got closer, his heart skipped a beat. It was a body, a woman, lying face down in the dirt. He immediately called the police, and within minutes, the quiet town of St. Mary's Parish was buzzing with activity. The police arrived on the scene and quickly identified the body as Emma Richardson, a well-known and respected member of the community. There were no obvious signs of struggle, but the marks on her neck suggested she had been strangled. The officers began canvassing the area, looking for any clues that might explain what had happened. By the evening of March 8th, the police had notified Emma's husband, John Richardson. He was devastated by the news and had no idea who could have done this to her. During questioning, he revealed that Emma had been distant and troubled in the months leading up to her death, but he hadn't known why. The officers took note of this, but at the time, John's grief seemed genuine, and they didn't consider him a suspect. Over the next few days, the investigators delved deeper into Emma's life, searching for any leads. On March 10th, they came across something that caught their attention: Emma's phone records. There were numerous calls and text messages exchanged between Emma and Father Michael Donovan. The frequency and the timing of the messages were unusual, especially considering the priest's vow of celibacy. The investigators began to suspect that there was more to their relationship than met the eye. Determined to find out the truth, the police obtained a warrant to search Emma's home. On March 12th, during a thorough search of her belongings, they discovered a hidden journal tucked away in a drawer. The entries in the journal were shocking. Emma had written about her affair with Father Michael in detail, describing her feelings of guilt, the abortion, and her plan to confess everything to the congregation. The discovery of the journal turned the investigation on its head. The police now had a clear motive and a prime suspect. They knew they needed to bring Father Michael in for questioning, but they also knew that they had to proceed carefully. The case was about to take a dramatic turn, and the community would soon learn that the man they had trusted and admired was not who they thought he was. As the investigation deepened, the detectives knew they had to handle the case delicately. St. Mary's Parish was a small, close-knit community, and Father Michael was a respected figure. The revelation that he could be involved in Emma's death would send shockwaves through the town. The detectives decided to move cautiously, gathering as much evidence as possible before making their next move. On March 15, 2024, Father Michael Donovan was summoned to the police station for questioning. He arrived, calm and composed, dressed in his usual clerical collar and black suit. The detectives led him to a small, sterile room with a single table and 2 chairs. They offered him a cup of coffee, which he politely declined. The questioning began with routine inquiries about his relationship with Emma Richardson. Father Michael maintained his composure, speaking softly and clearly. He claimed that his interactions with Emma were strictly pastoral, that he was there to provide spiritual guidance during her difficult times. But as the detectives pressed him with more detailed questions, his calm demeanor began to crack. When they brought up the journal, Father Michael's face turned pale. He tried to dismiss it, saying that Emma was troubled and may have written things that weren't true. But the detectives weren't buying it. They presented him with the phone records, showing the frequent communication between him and Emma, particularly in the weeks leading up to her death. Father Michael's agitation grew. He shifted in his seat, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to maintain his innocence. He denied having any inappropriate relationship with Emma, but the evidence was mounting against him. The detectives could see that they were getting to him, but they needed more to make their case airtight. 3 days later, on March 18, 2024, the investigation took a decisive turn. One of the detectives, reviewing hours of CCTV footage from nearby businesses, came across something significant. A gas station located a few miles from the field where Emma's body was found had captured footage of a car driving past on the night of the murder. The car matched the make and model of Father Michael's vehicle, and the time matched the window in which Emma was killed. The detectives knew they had found the missing piece. They tracked down the gas station attendant who was working that night and interviewed him. The attendant remembered seeing the car and mentioned that it was unusual to see anyone driving out that way at such a late hour. Armed with this new evidence, the detectives felt confident enough to bring Father Michael back in. On March 20th, 2024, the detectives made their move. They arrived at the rectory early in the morning, where Father Michael was preparing for the day's services. He was visibly shaken when he saw the officers at his door. They informed him that they had new evidence and asked him to come down to the station. This time, there was no polite invitation. They were there to arrest him. At the station, the detectives laid out the evidence, the journal, the phone records, and now the CCTV footage. Father Michael's hands shook as he tried to maintain his denial, but the weight of the evidence was too much. The detectives watched as the reality of his situation set in. Father Michael's voice cracked as he continued to deny everything, but it was clear that he was cornered. The detectives didn't need a confession at that moment. They had enough to charge him. They informed Father Michael that he was under arrest for the murder of Emma Richardson. As they read him his rights, the once respected priest slumped in his chair, his world crumbling around him. The man who had once stood at the pulpit, delivering sermons on morality and righteousness, was now being led away in handcuffs, his fall from grace complete. The news of Father Michael's arrest spread quickly through St. Mary's Parish. The community was in shock. Many couldn't believe that the man they had trusted with their confessions and their faith could be capable of such a crime. As Father Michael was taken into custody, the quiet town braced itself for the trial that would soon follow, knowing that the truth would eventually come to light in the courtroom. The secrets of St. Mary's Parish were no longer hidden, and the consequences would ripple through the community for years to come. The trial of Father Michael Donovan began on a cold, gray morning in late September. The courthouse was packed with people from St. Mary's Parish, eager to hear the details of the scandal that had rocked their community. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Susan Wright, a sharp and determined woman known for her relentless pursuit of justice. Across the courtroom sat Father Michael, his once proud figure now slumped in the defendant's chair, his eyes downcast. As the trial opened, D.A. Wright wasted no time laying out the case against Father Michael. She spoke with clear conviction, her voice echoing in the silent courtroom. She started by presenting the journal entries written by Emma Richardson. Each page was filled with raw emotion. Her love for Father Michael, her guilt over the affair, her deep regret about the abortion. The jury listened intently as D.A. Wright read aloud Emma's words, painting a picture of a woman who had been led down a dark path by the man she trusted. Next, D.A. Wright introduced the text messages and call logs. These showed Emma's repeated attempts to reach Father Michael in the days before her death. The messages were desperate, pleading, filled with confusion and sorrow. Emma had clearly been struggling, and Father Michael had ignored her, leaving her to face the consequences of their actions alone. The jury could see the pattern of communication, the way Emma's messages became more frantic as the days went by, and the coldness of Father Michael's brief, dismissive responses. But the most damning piece of evidence came in the form of the CCTV footage from the gas station. The grainy video showed Father Michael's car driving toward the field where Emma's body was later found. It was late at night, the road deserted, and the timing matched perfectly with the window in which Emma was murdered. The prosecution also presented forensic evidence. Tiny fibers found on Emma's clothing that matched the interior of Father Michael's car, and traces of soil on his shoes that matched the field where her body was discovered. As the prosecution's case unfolded, Father Michael's defense team, led by a seasoned attorney named Richard Green, prepared to counter. When it was their turn, Green stood and addressed the jury. His tone was calm, almost soothing, as he began to weave a narrative of a man pushed to the edge. He didn't deny the affair. It was clear from the evidence that there had been a relationship between Emma and Father Michael. But Green argued that Emma had become mentally unstable after the abortion, driven to the brink by guilt and grief. Green claimed that on the night of her death, Emma had confronted Father Michael, accusing him of ruining her life and threatening to expose him. He argued that Emma had become violent, and in the heat of the moment, Father Michael had acted in self-defense. It was a tragic accident, Green said, not premeditated murder. The defense presented a few witnesses, parishioners who had seen Emma looking distressed in the weeks before her death, trying to paint a picture of a woman unraveling. The trial stretched on for weeks, each side fiercely defending their version of events. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, with every new piece of evidence adding to the suspense. The jury watched closely, weighing the arguments, knowing that their decision would change lives forever. Finally, after days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. The courtroom was hushed as the foreman stood, his voice steady but grave. We, the jury, find the defendant, Father Michael Donovan, guilty of murder in the first degree. A collective gasp swept through the room. Father Michael's face drained of color, and he closed his eyes as the reality of the situation sank in. The once revered priest was now a convicted murderer. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars, his fall from grace complete. As the judge pronounced the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, the weight of the verdict settled over the courtroom. The people of St. Mary's Parish, who had once looked up to Father Michael as a moral guide, now saw him for what he had become. The trial had revealed the darkest secrets of their community, and the truth, once hidden, could never be ignored. As Father Michael was led away in handcuffs, the courtroom slowly emptied. The story of Emma Richardson and Father Michael Donovan would be told for years to come, a cautionary tale of love, betrayal, and the ultimate price of sin. The people of St. Mary's Parish returned to their lives, forever changed by the events that had unfolded in their midst. The trial was over, but the memory of what had happened would linger, a shadow over the town that would never fully disappear. We hope you enjoyed this true crime story as much as we did enjoy making this video. Subscribe to the channel to see more crime stories, and click here to see another thrilling story about true crime. Enjoy.